Hey guys, tonight we slip quietly into the plush shadows of ancient Rome and medieval courts, where silk curtains barely sway and every whispered secret might just rearrange the fate of empires. You probably won't survive a week in these tangled webs of love and power, because here, adultery isn't just scandal. It's a sharp-edged political tool wielded by the daring and the desperate alike. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, drop your location and local time in the comments so I know where you're tuning in from. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge through marble halls heavy with history, the air thick with the scent of oil lamps and unspoken tension. In ancient Rome, private affairs were rarely private. They echoed through stone corridors as signals, warnings, or weapons. You can almost hear the hushed conversations, a senator's wife meeting a rival's envoy, a mistress passing whispered secrets in a palace garden, a lover's quarrel that could topple a Senate faction. Historians still argue whether some affairs were genuine love or merely veils for political maneuvering. But the truth is tangled in the very fabric of Roman and medieval power. The famous case of Julius Caesar and Cleopatra, for example, wasn't just a romance for the history books. Their alliance, sealed with passion and political ambition, sent ripples across the Mediterranean world. Caesar's liaison with the Egyptian queen was a blend of desire and strategy, a perfect example of how adultery could shift the balance of empires. Meanwhile, in medieval Europe, royal marriages often hid secret liaisons that influenced court intrigues far beyond what any official treaty could. But it wasn't only the rulers who played these dangerous games. Courtesans and mistresses held sway over emperors and kings, their whispered words directing the rise and fall of ministers. It's easy to romanticize these relationships now. But back then, the price of being involved in such tangled affairs could be exile, imprisonment, or worse. And yes, some lovers met their end by poison or blade, wrapped in the guise of a romantic tragedy. A quirky tidbit for you: the Romans sometimes used crocodile dung as a form of contraception. Probably not the most romantic method. But hey, they had to get creative. Imagine how that smell mingled with the perfume in those shadowy rooms. So, as you lay back and listen, remember the tangled dance of love and politics wasn't just about hearts, it was about survival. And often, you didn't survive unless you were as cunning as the fox or as cold as the marble statues lining these ancient courts. You find yourself wandering deeper into the labyrinthine courts of medieval Europe, where marriages are less about love and more about chess moves on a gilded board. Imagine the heavy tapestries, the flickering candlelight casting long shadows on faces hardened by ambition. Here, wedding vows are whispered with, fingers crossed behind backs, and the bride and groom might barely know each other beyond the terms scribbled on a contract. Royal marriages were the political alliances of their day. Think of them as joint ventures, with less paperwork, but way more drama. You're invited to a banquet where the bride, a princess from a distant land, is introduced to her new kingdom, but behind her serene smile lies a secret. An arranged marriage, often masked hidden agendas and covert betrayals. Sometimes these unions concealed more than just dynastic ambitions. They were covers for spies, conduits for bribes, or even stage settings for assassination plots. Take Eleanor of Aquitaine. For example, one of the most powerful and enigmatic women of the 12th century. She married Louis VII of France and later Henry II of England, shifting the political map through her matrimonial ties. But Eleanor wasn't just a passive player in these arrangements. She wielded her influence and, through her patronage and alliances, shaped the destinies of entire nations. Scholars still debate whether Eleanor's marriages empowered her or trapped her within a gilded cage of power politics. In fact, Eleanor's second marriage to Henry II brought Aquitaine into the English sphere, sparking decades of conflict between England and France wars that lasted generations. Yet, beneath the grand narratives, it said Eleanor maintained several lovers during her marriages, some allegedly involved in plots to unseat her husband. Court gossip suggests her private life was as complicated as the politics swirling around her. Meanwhile, in the Eastern courts, Byzantine princesses often married Western nobles as part of delicate diplomatic exchanges. These unions brought not only political alliances but also cultural exchanges and, sometimes, espionage. A Byzantine bride might carry secrets encoded in her dowry or whispered in private audiences. Her loyalty torn between two worlds. Historians still argue about the extent to which these marriages facilitated intelligence gathering, but the tangled web of loyalties is undeniable. Quirky little detail. Medieval brides often carried love tokens, small charms, or rings gifted by secret lovers. Some of these tokens have been found centuries later in archaeological digs, a silent testament to affairs hidden beneath the official ceremony. Imagine the tension of wearing such a token, hoping no one noticed, while sitting beside your new spouse at the grand feast. You can almost hear the clink of goblets and hushed whispers plotting the next move. In this world, marriage wasn't about happily ever after. It was about survival, alliances, and sometimes outmaneuvering rivals with a smile as cold as the stone walls around you. Now, the scene shifts darker. Love and murder entwined so tightly, they're hard to separate. You're in the dimly lit chambers of a noble estate, where a poisoned cup sits on the table, its contents glinting dangerously in the flickering candlelight. In medieval courts, the line between passion and peril was razor thin. Affairs could end in stabbing, poisoning, or worse. The phrase "love is deadly" was not just poetic, it was literal. Take the infamous case of Lucrezia Borgia, a woman whose name still sends shivers down historians' spines, daughter of Pope Alexander VI. Lucrezia's marriages were political tools, but rumors painted her as a poisoner and assassin. While modern scholarship suggests many accusations were exaggerated or even fabricated by rivals, the legend persisted, fueling tales of poisoned gloves, poisoned combs, and secret assassination plots carried out in the guise of love. Historians still debate whether Lucrezia was a willing participant or a pawn in her family's deadly games. Some argue she was a victim, forced into marriages and political schemes beyond her control. Others claim she wielded her own power behind the scenes, using poison as her weapon of choice. The truth, as usual, lies somewhere between shadow and flame. You might find it chilling that in the late medieval period, some noble houses employed professional poisoners, individuals trained to craft the perfect lethal brew, silent and untraceable. The infamous Malleus Maleficarum, a witch-hunting manual, even includes recipes for poison and advice on how to detect it. Clearly, love was no safeguard against betrayal. A quirky tidbit in the 16th century. A concoction called acqua tofana became notorious across Italy. It was a clear, tasteless poison that some women reportedly used to rid themselves of unwanted husbands, a grim but effective love potion. You could say it was rumored to be passed discreetly in cosmetics or drinks, leaving victims to die slowly, often mistaken for illness. It's enough to make you rethink that sweet-smelling perfume on a mysterious lady. But poison wasn't the only weapon. A dagger hidden beneath a pillow. A sword thrust. During a midnight meeting, these too were tools of political passion. Remember that phrase about betrayal in the bedchamber? It wasn't just metaphorical. Lovers might plot together to kill a jealous husband or rival. Sometimes, with the tacit approval of a faction seeking power, you hear distant footsteps and muffled voices outside. A reminder that these deadly intrigues were rarely secret for long. Gossip. The medieval version of social media. Spread quickly through courts. Often weaponized to destroy reputations or justify revenge killings. Historians still argue about the frequency of such poisonings and murders. Some say they were rare exceptions blown out of proportion. Others insist these dark arts were common currency in the cutthroat politics of the time. No matter the truth, one thing is certain in this world: love was often laced with lethal intentions. And trust was a luxury few could afford. Step softly now, because the game of espionage was often played with whispers and winks in velvet-draped rooms. You enter a chamber where the scent of jasmine masks the tension, and every word spoken could be a secret message. In the courts of Rome and medieval Europe, mistresses and lovers weren't merely companions, they were eyes and ears, gathering intelligence from palace whispers. Imagine a mistress perched beside an emperor, her laughter light, but her mind sharp, picking up details from council meetings or rival factions. These women often wielded subtle power, acting as conduits of information to their patrons or even rival courts. Sometimes, their loyalty was divided. Their affections, a cloak for spying? Consider the infamous Madame de Pompadour, mistress to King Louis XV of France. While not from the medieval era, her role as a political advisor and spy highlights how lovers could transcend their traditional roles. She influenced appointments, diplomatic decisions, and even war strategies, all while maintaining her intimate position. Historians still debate whether such influence was typical or exceptional, but it shows how close love and politics could intertwine. In earlier times, Byzantine courtesans played similar rôles. These women were often educated and skilled in rhetoric, capable of swaying powerful men with their charm and intelligence. Some served as diplomats in disguise, carrying messages between courts or planting rumors to destabilize enemies. A quirky fact: some medieval lovers used coded letters or invisible ink made from lemon juice to communicate secret information. These letters had to be read by holding them close to a fire, revealing messages invisible to casual eyes. Imagine the thrill and danger of sending such letters, knowing interception could mean death. The courts also had official spies, often disguised as servants, entertainers, or companions who used their access to extract secrets. Lovers were ideal candidates, given their close proximity to power and the natural trust placed in intimacy, but loyalty was always suspect. Betrayal in these secret networks was common. A lover's heart might change with the wind, or they might be forced to switch sides under threat. The phrase "spy games in velvet" fits perfectly here. Elegance masking deadly stakes. Scholars still debate how much these personal relationships shaped major political decisions. Some argue that espionage through lovers was central to diplomacy, while others see it as an occasional but not decisive factor. So, as you imagine these smoky rooms and silken gowns, remember, behind every soft laugh might lie a secret weapon. The corridors grow darker as you realize the stakes inheritance behind closed doors. Adultery often ignited the fiercest wars, not just of armies, but of bloodlines and legacies. A single affair could threaten the transfer of titles, lands, and power, setting families against each other in deadly conflicts. You picture a noble family gathered in a stone hall. Accusations flying over, whispered rumors of illegitimate heirs. In medieval law, legitimacy was everything without it. Claims to thrones or estates could crumble like fragile parchment. Thus, accusations of adultery weren't just personal insults, they were political weapons. The case of Empress Matilda's claim to the English throne illustrates this vividly. After the death of her father, Henry I, her legitimacy was challenged by many nobles, partly due to the complex politics of marriage and affairs. The subsequent civil war, known as the Anarchy, tore England apart for nearly 2 decades. Historians still debate how much rumors of infidelity or illegitimacy influenced noble support during this turbulent period. Meanwhile, in the Byzantine Empire, the legitimacy of heirs was often contested amid court intrigues involving the emperor's wives, concubines, and favorites. Sometimes, an affair could produce a claimant to the throne, creating factions that backed rival offspring and plunged the empire into civil war. You might be surprised to learn that in some cultures, illegitimate children, sometimes born from politically motivated affairs, were later legitimized by royal decree to secure succession or alliances. It's a reminder that the lines between personal betrayal and political necessity were blurry. A quirky detail: medieval noble families sometimes kept secret birth chambers where heirs were born away from prying eyes to avoid rumors or accusations. This secrecy sometimes fueled more gossip. As absence from public view bred suspicion, courts were rife with poisonings and mysterious deaths aimed at removing heirs or their mothers. Ensuring a preferred lineage took precedence. The political fallout from an affair could last generations process. As families sought to erase inconvenient bloodlines or rewrite histories, scholars still argue whether adultery accusations were often genuine or merely political smokescreens designed to delegitimize rivals. What's clear is that the intersection of love, law, and inheritance was a volatile powder keg, with consequences spilling far beyond the bedroom. You can almost hear the clang of swords and the whispered oaths sworn in shadowed chapels. Inheritance was the prize, and adultery the battlefield. Now you step into the chambers of imperial concubines, figures often overlooked or misunderstood, but whose roles were vital in the political machinery of empire. Concubines weren't just lovers, they were pawns, power brokers, and sometimes kingmakers, influencing succession and court politics. In imperial China, for example, concubines competed fiercely for the emperor's favor, each hoping to elevate their offspring to the throne. The intrigues among them often sparked palace coups and assassination plots. While not medieval Europe, this illustrates a global phenomenon where love and power entwined in complex hierarchies. In medieval Europe, concubinage was officially frowned upon, but widely practiced among nobles and royalty. Some concubines wielded significant influence, especially when their children were recognized as heirs, or when they gained the ruler's trust. Think of Agnes Sorel, mistress to King Charles VII of France, who wielded notable political sway. Historians still debate how much concubines could independently affect policy or power shifts. Some argue their influence was minimal and mediated entirely by male relatives, while others suggest they were key players, managing patronage networks and swaying decisions behind closed doors. Ashura's tidbit in some courts. Concubines were given elaborate titles, palaces, and retinues, effectively creating parallel power centers within the royal household. Their presence sometimes incited jealousy from queens and noble wives, sparking bitter rivalries. Imperial concubines also served diplomatic roles, often brought from foreign lands to cement alliances or introduce new bloodlines. Their cultural backgrounds added layers of complexity to court dynamics and succession politics. You might be amused to learn that some concubines were renowned for their wit and intelligence, composing poetry and engaging in debates, gaining admiration beyond the bedchamber. But beware, the fall from grace was swift. A favored concubine could be banished, imprisoned, or even executed if political tides turned. Their lives balanced precariously on the emperor's whims and court intrigues. So, as you stroll these shadowed halls, remember that love in the imperial context was rarely simple. It was a gamble of power, survival, and ambition. Gifts are exchanged beneath the ornate chandeliers, a necklace sparkles, a love letter tucked discreetly in a silk sleeve. But in these courts, presents often carried secrets far more dangerous than affection. Poisoned gifts and coded letters with a shadowy undercurrent of courtship and betrayal. Consider the legend of the poison ring, a device capable of delivering a lethal dose with a twist of the finger. While their actual historical use is debated, stories of poison rings circulating in royal courts fuel imaginations about the perilous nature of intimacy. Some say such rings were less practical weapons and more symbols of mistrust, reminding recipients that danger lurked even in gifts. Love letters were another medium of secret communication. Beyond flowery prose, they sometimes contained hidden messages, letters written in invisible ink, acrostics revealing names, or ciphers only understood by the intended. The art of secret writing flourished, reflecting the high stakes of political and romantic intrigue. You might find it fascinating that some letters were written in code, using musical notation, or even in a constructed language to avoid prying eyes. The length and complexity of these codes suggest a sophisticated network of spies and informants operating through intimate channels. Historians still debate how widespread and effective such cryptography was in medieval courts. Some argue it was limited to elite circles, while others believe coded correspondence was common among diplomats and lovers alike. Poisoned gifts weren't limited to rings. Flowers, food, perfumes, and cosmetics were all potential carriers of deadly substances. The famous smiling assassin, a courtesan skilled in administering poison through a touch or a kiss, remains a popular figure in folklore, though evidence for such individuals is scant. A quirky tidbit in the 15th century, a perfume called Mercury's Breath was rumored to contain toxic ingredients capable of weakening or killing an enemy. While probably exaggerated, it speaks to the fears and suspicions surrounding everyday objects in court life. Receiving a gift was thus a gamble. Acceptance could mean favor. Rejection could mean offense. And both had political consequences. Gifts were as much weapons as tokens of affection. So, As you imagine these exchanges, gloves embroidered with secrets, bouquets concealing death, you understand that in these courts, even love had a deadly edge. You find yourself seated beside an emperor's favored mistress, a woman whose influence stretches far beyond whispered sweet nothings. In courts across time, mistresses weren't merely companions, they were queenmakers. Their favor capable of shaping dynasties and altering the course of history. You lean in close, feeling the pulse of power behind her soft smile and measured glance. Take Madame de Pompadour again, a name that echoes through the gilded halls of French history. Though she lived in the 18th century, her role illustrates an enduring pattern: mistresses who transcend personal intimacy to become political powerhouses. Pompadour advised King Louis XV on matters of state, patronized the arts, and deftly navigated court factions, proving that behind the throne, influence often had a softer voice. Historians still debate how much of her political savvy was self-driven versus orchestrated by others. But her legacy as a queenmaker is undeniable. In medieval courts, the role of the mistress was more precarious but no less potent. For instance, in the English court, Alice Perez, mistress to Edward III, wielded influence so strong that nobles sought her favor to advance their causes. She amassed wealth and power, even during the king's absence, sparking outrage and political backlash. Scholars argue about whether such women were manipulative villains or savvy survivors navigating a male-dominated world. Mistresses often brokered alliances, secured appointments, and influenced succession by bearing children or by swaying the ruler's decisions. Their position was informal yet critical, a shadow throne shaping events behind the scenes. You notice how courtiers cater to her every whim, aware that a single word from her could make or break a career. Curiously, some mistresses became patrons of culture, commissioning artworks, sponsoring boots, and shaping the aesthetic of their eras. This dual role of political operator and cultural influencer paints a complex picture: power exercised with a touch of elegance. However, the risks were enormous. A mistress's fall from favor could lead to exile, imprisonment, or worse. Queens and noble wives sometimes saw these women as direct threats, sparking deadly rivalries. You imagine the tension. A subtle war fought with glances and whispers rather than swords. Interestingly, in some courts, the title official royal mistress was granted, legitimizing the position and even conferring legal rights, though such recognition was controversial and not universal. These roles challenged conventional ideas of marriage, loyalty, and legitimacy, blurring lines in ways that keep historians debating centuries later. So, as you sip your wine beside this formidable woman, remember that her power comes not from a crown, but from influence wielded with finesse, a queenmaker operating in the shadows of the throne. The fine line between lover and assassin blurs as you tread into the most dangerous corners of courtly intrigue. Imagine a dagger concealed beneath the folds of a lover's cloak, a kiss that carries not affection, but a deadly secret. In this treacherous game, spies hide behind romantic facades, their love stories, a guise for assassination and betrayal. History offers chilling examples. Consider the Borgias, whose name became synonymous with poison and political murder. While some tales are likely exaggerated by rivals, it's clear their intimate circles were rife with deadly secrets. Lovers could be informants, assassins, or political pawns? Their affections, a mask for far darker purposes. In Renaissance Italie, courtiers employed assassin lovers trained in seduction and killing. These individuals gained trust through intimacy, only to deliver fatal blows when least expected. The art of the love assassin became both a feared and whispered legend, inspiring countless stories of betrayal. You might be intrigued to know about the dagger glove, a glove with hidden blades used for silent kills, favored by some elite assassins who operated in courts. While evidence is scarce, the concept reflects the paranoia and cunning of the era. Scholars still argue about the extent to which romantic relationships were exploited for such deadly purposes. Was it a widespread tactic or confined to specific? Infamous families. The truth is elusive. Buried beneath layers of rumor and legend, beyond assassination, lovers served as channels for espionage. Smuggling secrets through coded conversations and covert meetings, the phrase lover's rendezvous took on double meaning, both passion and peril. Yet trust was fragile. A lover could switch allegiances overnight, delivering secrets to the highest bidder, or the most dangerous faction. Such betrayals reshaped alliances and sometimes toppled kingdoms. On a lighter note, medieval poets often romanticized these dangerous liaisons, spinning tales where love conquered death, perhaps a welcome escape from the grim realities of court life. So, as you walk this knife edge between desire and death, remember that behind every embrace might lurk a knife, and behind every kiss, a secret that could change the fate of nations. Private affairs explode into public spectacle as you witness scandal trials that rip through the heart of courts, exposing secret liaisons with political consequences. You sit in a packed hall, the air thick with anticipation and whispered gossip, watching as accusations fly and reputations hang in the balance. In Rome and medieval Europe, adultery trials were not merely about morality, but were deeply entwined with power struggles. The infamous trial of Queen Caroline of Naples, accused of adultery and conspiracy in the 14th century, showcases how such proceedings could be used to eliminate rivals. Though she was eventually exonerated, the trial itself destabilized the kingdom and empowered competing factions. Historians debate how many trials were genuine attempts at justice versus political show trials orchestrated to remove inconvenient players. The line between law and spectacle was often blurred. Public trials served as cautionary tales, reinforcing social norms, but also providing entertainment for the masses. Court poets and chroniclers eagerly documented these dramas, feeding the rumor mills and influencing public opinion. You might be surprised to learn that in some medieval cities, trials could involve humiliating punishments, public shaming, forced penance, or even physical penalties. For nobles, however, trials were often less about punishment and more about political theater. A quirky fact: some courts used trial by ordeal methods requiring accused lovers to carry hot irons or submerge hands in boiling water to prove innocence. While archaic, these rituals persisted well into the medieval period, reflecting the interplay between superstition and law. Scandalous affairs often provided openings for ambitious courtiers to gain favor or topple opponents. A whispered accusation could topple a minister or force a royal consort into exile. In this charged atmosphere, secrecy was a weapon, and discretion a survival skill. Yet when affairs were exposed, the fallout could be explosive, affecting alliances, marriages, and even treaties. So, as you watch this public drama unfold, remember that in these courts, Private passions were never truly private, and the courtroom was just another stage for power plays. Forbidden meetings and court intrigues pulse beneath the veneer of polite conversation as you slip into secret chambers and shadowy gardens. You glimpse lovers exchanging hurried glances, couriers slipping messages under doors, and conspirators plotting revolutions cloaked in silks. Court life was a complex ballet of appearances and hidden motives. Secret rendezvous weren't just romantic, they were strategic, shaping the fate of kingdoms with every stolen moment. Consider the tale of Anne Boleyn and King Henry VIII. Their secret meetings sparked a political and religious upheaval that would alter England's history forever. Their clandestine affair led to the English Reformation and the establishment of the Church of England, breaking centuries of papal authority. Historians still debate how much Anne's personal ambitions versus political necessity drove this seismic shift. Was it love, power, or a mix of both? Regardless, their secret meetings set in motion a transformation that echoed through the ages. Beyond the well-known, countless lesser-known lovers met in hidden passages, behind tapestries, or under moonlit terraces. These meetings were fraught with risk. Discovery could mean exile, imprisonment, or death. Quirky tidbit: some castles featured lovers' holes, small openings in walls, allowing secret communication or passage between chambers. While romanticized in legend, such architectural features underscore the importance of secrecy. These hidden liaisons also provided opportunities for exchanging intelligence or forging secret alliances. Courtiers often used romantic encounters to broker deals or sway opinions away from official channels. The tension between public duty and private desire created a fertile ground for intrigue. Even servants and attendants could become unwitting accomplices or dangerous informants. Scholars argue about how much these secret meetings influenced major political events versus being mere distractions. Either way, the human need for connection found its way into even the most controlled and surveilled environments. As you imagine these furtive encounters, remember in the courts, love and politics danced a delicate waltz behind closed doors, forever altering the course of history. You're introduced to foreign wives, whose arrivals on gilded ships bring more than dowries, they carry espionage, shifting loyalties, and the hopes of entire nations. Marriages across borders weren't just about alliance building, but served as conduits for intelligence and cultural exchange. Take the marriage of Margaret of Anjou to King Henry VI of England. Sent as a political bride from France, her arrival introduced complex loyalties and eventually played a key role in the Wars of the Roses. Margaret wasn't a passive bride. She became a formidable political actor, leading armies and negotiating alliances. Historians debate whether her influence stemmed from personal ambition or a desire to protect her son's claim to the throne. In Byzantine diplomacy, princesses often served dual roles as wives and spies. Their allegiances were divided between birth and marriage, and their movements closely watched by both courts. They carried with them networks of informants and subtle channels for sending messages. You might be fascinated to learn about the bride train tradition, where entourages accompanying foreign brides included spies and diplomats trained to observe and report on the new court's politics and customs. Sometimes, these foreign wives introduced new customs, languages, or religious practices, reshaping court culture. Their presence could spark tensions between native factions and foreign interests. Quirky fact: some foreign brides brought unique gifts like exotic pets, spices, or medicinal herbs, which became symbols of their status and tools for influence. The complexity of these unions often resulted in volatile loyalties. Some foreign wives sided with their birth families during conflicts, igniting civil wars or coups. Scholars still discuss how much foreign marriage diplomacy shaped medieval geopolitics. Some view it as essential for peace and alliance building, others as fraught with risk and cultural clashes. As you watch the arrival of a foreign princess, remember, behind the welcoming ceremonies lie layers of intrigue, negotiation, and sometimes betrayal. Lovers become political hostages as you witness rulers wielding intimate relationships like chains to control enemies and allies alike. The personal becomes the political, in a game where affection and imprisonment intertwine. In medieval Europe, it was common for rulers to take the family members or favored companions of rival nobles as hostages to guarantee loyalty. These political prisoners were sometimes kept in luxurious quarters, their treatment dependent on the shifting tides of power. One striking example is Blanche of Castile, who was married off to Louis VIII of France, but held hostage in England during conflicts between the two kingdoms. Such arrangements complicated loyalties and created fraught personal dynamics. Even lovers themselves could become pawns. A mistress or wife might be detained to pressure their partner, or used to extract information. Their fates were deeply tied to political machinations beyond their control. Quirky detail. Some hostages maintained elaborate courtly lifestyles with tutors, entertainers, and servants, turning captivity into a gilded cage. The emotional toll of these situations is hard to measure, but letters and chronicles reveal stories of longing, betrayal, and negotiation from behind palace walls. Historians still debate how common hostage-taking was as a tool of diplomacy versus a last resort. Either way, it highlights how deeply politics penetrated the private sphere. In some cases, hostages managed to influence their captors, forming unexpected alliances, or even plotting escape. Their role was not always passive, making hostage politics a dynamic and unpredictable facet of medieval power. So, as you contemplate this fusion of love and imprisonment, remember that in the courts, freedom was often relative, and affection could be captivity. Seduction as a weapon of war unfolds before you, intimacy wielded as strategy to destabilize rivals and gather secrets. The battlefield isn't always a field of swords. Sometimes it's a bed, where hearts and alliances are conquered. Historical accounts suggest that rulers and generals employed seduction to manipulate enemies, infiltrate courts, or extract valuable information. These were not merely affairs of the heart, but calculated moves in the grand chess game of power. A notable example is the alleged use of spy courtesans in Byzantine and Ottoman courts. Women trained to charm and deceive high-ranking officials. Their success lay in blending allure with cunning, gathering secrets in whispered conversations or stolen letters. Scholars debate the extent of such practices, whether widespread espionage through seduction was common or confined to elite circles. However, the notion of honey traps remains a persistent theme in political intrigue. Quirky fact: some courtesans maintained detailed notebooks, recording observations about their patrons and rivals, serving as informal intelligence dossier. Seduction was also a tool for forging alliances. Romantic liaisons could soften political stances, create bonds of trust, or even secure peace treaties disguised as personal favors, but the risks were immense. If discovered, both the seducer and the target faced ruin, and alliances could shatter overnight. You can imagine the tension in these encounters, where every touch, glance, and word carried layers of meaning and danger. So, as you watch these delicate dances of desire and deception, remember, in the theater of war, love could be the sharpest weapon. You're introduced to the secret networks of courtesans women who, through intimate connections, controlled the flow of information and wielded surprising power behind the scenes. These networks formed shadow governments, operating in parallel to official courts. Courtesans were often highly educated, skilled in politics, arts, and languages, making them ideal confidantes and influencers. Their clients included nobles, diplomats, and military leaders, granting access to the highest circles. In Renaissance Venice, for example, courtesans were not only companions, but also cultural icons and political players. Some amassed wealth and influence comparable to their patrons. Historians still debate whether courtesans were empowered figures or exploited entertainers. But their role in shaping politics is undeniable. These women communicated through subtle signals, coded language, gifts, or meetings to exchange news, warnings, or secrets. They formed intricate webs of loyalty and rivalry, controlling what information reached whom. Quirky tidbit: courtesans sometimes held salons gatherings for intellectuals, artists, and politicians that became hubs for political discussion and alliance formation. Courtesan networks could sway elections, broker marriages, or influence treaties. Their position was precarious but potent. Yet, courtesans were also vulnerable targets for slander, violence, or exile if they overstepped boundaries or became entangled in court rivalries. You imagine the whispered conversations, the passing of folded notes, and the silent nods exchanged in dimly lit rooms, actions that could topple kingdoms or elevate fortunes. Scholars continue to explore the complex social and political roles courtesans played, recognizing them as vital agents in the tapestry of medieval and Renaissance power. So, as you ponder these secretive circles, remember, that power often flowed through unexpected channels, and that intimacy was as much a currency as gold or land. You're drawn into the dimly lit nursery chambers where children are born and futures forged in shadows. Here, the story of illegitimate heirs unfolds, children born from secret liaisons. Their existence both a blessing and a curse in the ruthless game of succession. These children of the shadows could disrupt dynasties, ignite wars, or sometimes be quietly erased from history. In medieval Europe, the status of illegitimate children, often called bastards, was complicated and fraught with peril. Unlike legitimate heirs born within marriage, bastards typically lacked legal rights to inherit titles or lands. Yet, some managed to carve out powerful roles, either through royal favor or sheer force. The Plantagenet dynasty in England, for example, counted several influential illegitimate sons who held lands and wielded significant political power. You might find it fascinating that in some cases, illegitimate heirs were legitimized through royal decrees or papal dispensations, blurring the lines between scandal and sovereignty. The notorious Henry Fitzroy, illegitimate son of Henry VIII, was made Duke of Richmond and Somerset, a rare elevation illustrating the complexities of blood and power. Historians still debate how widespread and accepted such legitimizations were, with some arguing they were political tools to secure loyalty, while others see them as exceptions to harsh societal norms. A quirky tidbit. Some illegitimate children were hidden away in monasteries or distant estates to avoid scandal or rivalry. Growing up cloaked in anonymity despite their noble blood. These children sometimes became pawns in political marriages or were used as bargaining chips in court intrigues. Their loyalties were often divided, caught between their birthright and the legitimacy denied to them. You imagine the tension in the courts when rumors of a bastard's claim surfaced. Noble families would bristle, alliances shift, and sometimes violence would erupt to settle the question. The existence of illegitimate heirs added an unpredictable element to succession crises, challenging the stability of kingdoms and empires. As you picture these children growing in the shadows of power, remember that lineage wasn't always a straight path, and sometimes the most dangerous rivals were those born outside the light. The church, law, and adultery politics intertwine like threads in a tapestry as you enter the grand halls of ecclesiastical power. Religion and law weren't just moral guides. They were powerful tools manipulated to control behavior, enforce hierarchies, and serve political agendas. In medieval Europe, the church's stance on adultery was strict and influential. Adulterous women faced severe penalties ranging from public shaming and fines to imprisonment or exile, while men often escaped harsher consequences. This gendered enforcement reinforced patriarchal control over family and society. The implementation of laws like the canon law of the church or local secular statutes often intersected with political interests. Rulers used accusations of adultery to undermine rivals, justify confiscations of property, or annul inconvenient marriages. One fascinating example is the use of penitential books that prescribed specific punishments for sins, including adultery. These guides varied widely, depending on region and social status. Reflecting the complex and often inconsistent application of law, historians still debate whether these laws were genuinely enforced or more symbolic tools wielded selectively to control certain groups, especially women. You might be intrigued to know that in some cases, noble women accused of adultery were confined to convents as a form of punishment and political exile, a grim but common fate. The church's role extended beyond punishment. It also arbitrated marriage disputes and legitimacy claims, deeply affecting succession and inheritance. Quirky detail. Some medieval courts held ordeals supervised by church officials to determine guilt, blending religious ritual with legal proceedings, though such practices declined over time. Political leaders sometimes used church courts to target opponents under the guise of moral reform. Intertwining religious authority with secular power, this nexus of church, law, and adultery created a labyrinthine system where accusations were as much about power as morality. As you walk these corridors, lined with religious icons and legal texts, remember that faith and law were often as much political weapons as guides to virtue. The shadows lengthen as you learn of the exile and assassination of lovers whose affairs turned fatal in the cutthroat political arenas. When adultery crossed dangerous lines, the consequences could be exile to remote lands or a death cloaked in mystery. Exile served as a political tool to remove inconvenient lovers or rivals without public executions that might provoke unrest. In Rome and medieval courts, banished individuals often found themselves stripped of titles and resources, isolated far from the centers of power. Take the tragic tale of Heloise and Abelard, whose passionate affair led to scandal, exile, and lifelong separation. While not political exiles per se, their story reflects the personal cost of forbidden love in a society governed by strict codes. Assassination was an even darker fate. Lovers caught in political webs sometimes became targets, eliminated to silence secrets or settle scores. The case of Grigory Otrepiev, the false Dmitri, includes rumors of assassinated lovers used to secure his claim to the Russian throne. Historians still argue over the accuracy of many such accounts, distinguishing between propaganda and reality. The veil of secrecy around political murders often obscures the truth, feeding legends and conspiracy theories. A quirky tidbit: some assassinations were disguised as accidents or illnesses. Using poisons derived from plants like belladonna or hemlock substances known and feared by medieval apothecaries, the psychological toll on those targeted was immense. With fear and paranoia permeating court life, loyalty was fragile, and trust a rare commodity. You can almost feel the chill of solitude in exile, or the sudden silence that follows a lover's mysterious death. In these harsh realities, love was not just risky, it was potentially deadly. You now move into the subtle art of silence and discretion codes, signals, and rituals crafted to hide forbidden relationships from prying eyes. In courts where a single glance could condemn you, discretion was survival. Secret signs, like particular jewelry worn a certain way, coded handkerchiefs, or arranged flowers, communicated affection or warnings. These signals required a shared understanding, creating a language of love concealed in plain sight. The infamous lover's knot, a decorative motif, symbolized secret bonds and was often incorporated into embroidery or jewelry. Its meaning was clear only to those in the know. Historians still explore the extent to which such codes were standardized or improvised, debating their impact on courtly communication. You might be amused to learn that some messages were hidden in seemingly innocent poems or songs, with double meanings deciphered only by recipients. In some cases, entire rooms had concealed passages or secret compartments to facilitate clandestine meetings or the exchange of letters. Quirky fact: medieval lovers sometimes used courting gloves, gloves with hidden compartments, to pass notes or small tokens discreetly. The risk of discovery was ever present. Servants, spies, and jealous rivals watched for any sign of impropriety. Yet these secret rituals also fostered intimacy and creativity, turning surveillance into a game of wit and subtlety. As you imagine these hidden exchanges, remember that love in the courts was as much about what wasn't said as what was whispered. You meet the female spies and informants who transformed passion into political intelligence, wielding their allure as weapons in the shadowy battles of power. These women navigated dangerous roles, balancing personal risk with political gain. Historical examples abound in the Ottoman Empire. Women of the harem sometimes acted as agents, influencing sultans and feeding information to factions. Similarly, in Renaissance Italy and France, spies disguised as lovers gathered secrets that could topple regimes. Some women built reputations as master manipulators, using charm and wit to extract information. Their agency challenged contemporary gender norms, making them both feared and respected. Historians debate how autonomous these female spies truly were, whether they acted independently or as tools of male handlers, but their impact on intelligence networks is undeniable. A quirky tidbit: some female spies used perfumes infused with herbal compounds believed to enhance persuasion or mask sense, adding a layer of psychological warfare. The dangers were immense. Capture meant torture, execution, or lifelong imprisonment. Yet many embrace these roles, seeing them as paths to influence otherwise denied. You imagine the tension in whispered conversations, coded letters, and stolen glances, all part of a vast web of intrigue woven through passion. These women remind us that behind every political move, there are human stories of courage, risk, and survival. As you reflect on their tales, remember that power often wears many faces, and sometimes the softest voice carries the sharpest edge. You step quietly into a richly decorated chamber where betrayal lurks like a shadow waiting to pounce. Lovers switching sides overnight. This was the ruthless reality behind the velvet curtains of power. In courts where alliances were as fleeting as candlelight, trust was a fragile luxury, and the bedchamber often became the most treacherous battlefield of all. Picture a nobleman who wakes to find his trusted lover has whispered secrets to his enemies or swapped allegiance for a higher offer. Such betrayals could shatter coalitions, ignite civil wars, or topple kings. One famous example is the court of Edward II of England, where favorite companions' shifting loyalties fueled political instability and contributed to the king's downfall. Historians still debate the true impact of these personal betrayals on broader political events. Lovers' betrayals weren't just personal, they were political weapons wielded in shadow wars. In some cases, spies posed as lovers, weaving webs of deceit with seductive charm. The phrase betrayal in the bedchamber was literal, as well as metaphorical. Quirky fact courtiers sometimes used perfumes scented with musk or jasmine, not just to entice, but to mask their own nervousness during dangerous liaisons. The scent was a double-edged sword, alluring, but also a signal of intrigue. The risk of discovery was immense. Rumor spread quickly, and accusations could lead to imprisonment or worse, yet the temptation to gain power or favor often outweighed the dangers. As you imagine these tangled betrayals, remember that, in the courts, loyalty was as unpredictable as the flicker of a candle flame. One moment warm, the next consumed by darkness. You find yourself amid the swirling currents of political propaganda and affair rumors, stories spun like silk threads to shape public opinion and justify power grabs. In a world without mass media, rumor mills were the primary engines of influence, and tales of illicit love were powerful tools. Kings and queens found their reputations built or broken on whispers of scandal. The Tudor court, for example, was rife with rumors, some true, many fabricated to undermine rivals or rally support. Anne Boleyn's alleged infidelities were used both to justify her execution and to erase her legacy. Historians still argue about the truth behind many such rumors. How much was political invention versus reality? Yet the effect on public perception and court politics was undeniable. You might be surprised to learn that pamphlets, songs, and plays often served as propaganda vehicles, spreading scandalous stories far and wide. This early media shaped narratives and influenced loyalties. Quirky tidbit: some nobles employed gossip mongers, individuals who spread carefully crafted rumors to destabilize opponents or bolster their own standing. The power of rumors extended beyond courts. Common people eagerly consumed tales of royal scandal, blurring lines between politics and entertainment. As you imagine these swirling stories, remember that in this world, truth was often a casualty, and perception could be mightier than reality. Now, you witnessed the meteoric rise of favorites, lovers who climbed beyond the throne's shadow to wield real power. Their journeys were as dazzling as they were perilous, marked by favor, influence, and eventual downfall. Cardinal Richelieu, while not a royal favorite, illustrates how close advisors and intimates could steer nations. In courts where kings delegated power, favorites often controlled appointments, policiers, and patronage. Mistress like Madame de Maintenon, wife to Louis XIV, transitioned from lovers to political partners. Shaping state affairs and court culture? Historians debate whether such favorites were puppets or puppeteers, but their impact is undeniable. Quirky fact: some favorites commissioned lavish portraits and artworks to cement their legacy, leaving behind visual testimonies of their influence. Their rise sparked envy and factionalism, with rival courtiers plotting their fall. The story of favorite Louis XV mistress Madame de Barry shows how quickly favor could turn to disgrace. As you watch these rises and falls, remember that power granted by affection was intoxicating but unstable, a flame that could burn bright and fast. You enter a world ablaze with royal jealousies and deadly feuds, where love and envy intertwine like serpents coiling beneath velvet cloaks. The courts of medieval Europe were arenas not just for battles of swords, but for bitter rivalries fueled by passion, suspicion, and the fierce desire to hold on to power. Imagine the imposing halls of the French court, where two women, queen and mistress, stand as polar opposites, yet are locked in a constant, dangerous dance. Catherine de Médicis and Diane de Poitiers, two of the most powerful figures in 16th century France, embodied this bitter rivalry. Though separated by marriage and favor, their personal animosity rippled through politics, influencing kings, courtiers, and even foreign policy. Historians debate the precise motivations behind their feud. Was it purely personal jealousy, or a calculated power struggle dressed in emotional garb? Some suggest Catherine's political savvy transformed personal rivalry into a weapon against Diane's influence over King Henry II. But royal jealousies often ran deeper and darker than the public eye could see. Poison was rumored to have played a role, though evidence is thin. The very suspicion added to the climate of fear. In a time when women had limited official power, rivalry in love and favor was a primary battlefield. A quirky detail: certain poisons like arsenic were known as the inheritance powder, quietly removing inconvenient rivals in silence. Nobles sometimes tested food or wine for poisons by offering it first to animals, a grim form of medieval safety check. Jalousies fueled conspiracies, secret alliances, and sometimes outright violence. Queens plotted to secure their children's thrones. Mistresses sought to displace rivals, and noblewomen leveraged every opportunity to elevate their families. These feuds were not just about personal vendettas, but shaped the very course of kingdoms. Battles for favor could shift alliances, cause rebellions, and even spark wars. As you walk these treacherous corridors, feel the tension crackle, a reminder that in the courts, love and hate often fed each other, with consequences that echo through history. Behind the gilded palace doors, eunuchs moved like silent shadows, gatekeepers and manipulators of secrets, wielding influence far beyond their status. As servants in Byzantine, Ottoman, and other courts, eunuchs were indispensable players in the intricate game of palace politics. You step into the Ottoman harem, where eunuchs guarded the inner sanctum, controlling who had access to the Sultan. Their loyalty was crucial, and their knowledge of palace intrigues immense. Some eunuchs rose to powerful positions, acting as advisors, diplomats, or even regents. Historians continue to debate the extent of eunuch power. Were they mere functionaries or shadow sovereigns operating behind the scenes? Records show eunuchs acting decisively in political decisions, sometimes overthrowing rivals or protecting factions. A quirky tidbit: eunuchs were often skilled in administration, music, and the arts, and some became notable patrons of culture, commissioning mosques, palaces, and literature. Their unique position, neither fully male nor female in a patriarchal society, placed them in complex social limbo, trusted yet often feared. The process of castration was brutal and often fatal, adding to the grim reality behind their service. Yet, for many, service as a eunuch offered power and privilege unavailable elsewhere, a path from obscurity to influence. You sense their dual role as guardians and manipulators? They shaped the flow of information, controlled access, and sometimes dictated the fate of rulers. As you observe these shadowy figures, you understand that power in the courts took many hidden forms. The tales of forbidden love echo through history's halls, their bittersweet melodies shaping cultural perceptions of passion and politics. These stories endure because they touch on the timeless conflict between desire and duty, personal freedom and social order. You sit by the fire as a minstrel recounts the saga of Abelard and Heloise, a scholar and his pupil whose love defied church doctrine and societal norms. Their correspondence, passionate and philosophical, reveals the pain of forbidden love and the sacrifices demanded by faith and family. Their story inspired generations of poets and romantics, casting a glow of tragic nobility over the concept of illicit affection. Yet, scholars argue whether such tales reflect typical experiences or exceptional cases. Did forbidden love mostly bring ruin? Or could it sometimes spark genuine transformation? Quirky detail, medieval manuscripts of love stories often included elaborate illuminations, tiny golden hearts, and entwined figures, revealing the cultural significance placed on these narratives. Forbidden love challenged social hierarchies, sometimes provoking change by questioning rigid norms. But it also reaffirmed the dangers of transgression. You imagine the secret letters, the stolen moments, the heavy silences of separation. These stories remind you that love's power lies not only in joy, but in struggle. You slip into the shadowy world of assassins cloaked in desire, where love and death mingle like smoke and flame. Here, killers disguised as lovers navigate the courts with lethal intent, their smiles as sharp as the daggers they conceal. This is the realm where passion serves as a deadly mask, and seduction becomes a weapon of statecraft. Imagine a young noble woman, beautiful and captivating, sent into the heart of an enemy's court under the guise of a mistress. Her mission is whispered in secret councils to charm, to extract secrets, to silence rivals forever. These love assassins were the stuff of both whispered rumors and grim reality, figures who blurred the line between affection and annihilation. In Renaissance Italy, the infamous Borgias, whose name still conjures images of poison and intrigue, are often associated with such deadly seductions. Though many tales are exaggerated or products of hostile propaganda, it's undeniable that their circles operated with ruthless efficiency, and that intimate liaisons could end in death as often as in favor. Historians still debate how widespread and systematic these love assassins truly were. Some argue that the phenomenon was confined to elite families obsessed with control, while others see a broader pattern of espionage and assassination masked by romance. The poisons used were as varied as the assassins themselves. The notorious aqua tofana, Ateistles, colorless liquid, was allegedly crafted by women seeking to free themselves from unwanted husbands or political constraints. Its slow, undetectable effects made it the perfect weapon for clandestine murder, and legends say it was widely circulated in 17th century Italy. Quirky tidbit: some assassins mastered the art of using exotic venom derived from rare animals or plants, like the deadly belladonna, or the less-known hemlock, delivering death in a way that looked like natural illness. These poisons were often mixed into cosmetics, perfumes, or food, making everyday encounters perilous. These love assassins inspired countless stories, from the shadowed alleys of Venice to the grand palaces of France. Their legend endures because it speaks to a primal fear that the people closest to us may harbor the deadliest intentions. You feel the tension in this world, where every touch could mean betrayal. Every whisper, a prelude to demise. Behind every smile lurks a secret, and behind every embrace, a potential death sentence. You unfurl secret correspondences, fragile parchment bearing the intimate words of lovers whose passions were as political as they were personal. These letters, cloaked in cryptic codes and delicate language, offer a rare window into the hearts and minds of historical figures navigating the perilous intersection of love and power. Take the letters of Mary, Queen of Scots, whose written words reveal not just romance but conspiracy. Her epistles to various lovers and allies are threaded with coded messages, warnings, and political maneuverings that altered the course of British history. The discovery of these letters sent shockwaves through the courts, exposing plots and secrets that had lain hidden beneath formal diplomacy. These correspondences are invaluable to historians, but also pose enormous challenges. Decoding their cryptic content requires expertise in linguistics, history, and cryptography. Some letters were written in invisible ink made from natural substances like lemon juice or milk, only revealing their secrets when heated over a flame. Quirky detail: some letters employed acrostics, where the first letter of each line spells out a hidden message, or musical notation used as a cipher, reflecting the creativity and desperation of those who had to communicate under surveillance. Historians debate the authenticity and meaning of some letters, as forgeries and deliberate misinformation were common in politically charged environments. The fine line between genuine affection and political manipulation is often impossible to discern. These letters humanize figures otherwise frozen in history's grand narratives. They show rulers as vulnerable, passionate, and often trapped between heart and crown. Imagine the danger in penning such messages, each word a gamble, each delivery a risk of exposure and death. These secret correspondences are echoes from the past, whispering tales of love that shaped empires, of secrets that toppled thrones. You enter the solemn halls of academia, where historians engage in spirited debates about love's role in politics, debates as complex and layered as the very histories they study. Was love a catalyst for political change, or merely a footnote in the grand saga of power? Opinions diverge sharply. Some scholars argue that romantic relationships and adultery were central forces shaping alliances, betrayals, and successions. They point to numerous cases where love affairs influenced decisions of state. altered succession lines, or precipitated wars. Others contend that love's political role has been overstated, inflated by rumor and sensationalism. They emphasize structural factors, economic interests, military strength, religious authority as primary drivers, relegating love to a marginal role. Quirky tidbit, heated historiographical battles sometimes focus on the interpretation of a single letter or poem, with entire academic careers built on deciphering the nuances of courtly love or scandal. The debates reveal the challenges of reconstructing the past from fragmented, biased, and often contradictory sources. The line between passion and politics is porous, and historians must navigate a labyrinth of propaganda, myth, and reality. This discourse deepens your understanding of history's complexity, reminding you that every narrative is shaped by those who tell it, each with their own lens and agenda. As you listen to these intellectual jousts, you appreciate that love in politics is both timeless and elusive, a force that defies simple explanation. You pause to reflect on the vast tapestry woven from power, love, and betrayal, a fabric that has shaped empires slowly, dangerously, and always with a profoundly human touch. The stories you've heard reveal adultery not as mere personal failing, but as a potent political act, a weapon that could build or destroy kingdoms. Power was wielded not just through armies or laws, but through whispered promises, secret liaison, and broken hearts. Behind every throne sat a network of relationships, fragile and complex, where trust was rare and betrayal commonplace. As you breathe in the weight of centuries, you understand that history's grand events rest on the fragile foundation of human passion, fear, ambition, and desire. The vivid scenes begin to fade, replaced by the quiet night, leaving you with a sense of awe for the people who lived, loved, and survived amid shadows and light. You realize that while empires rise and fall, the human heart beats on, driven by love, complicated by betrayal, and forever entwined with the fate of nations.